Quinterra is a roguelite turn-based tactics game that is hugely in-depth and is going to require an awful lot of time for me to explain kind of how the game works. So please do bear with me because this is going to be a long one. I came to this game from really enjoying Faeria, but I've seen people basically say that this is a mix of Faeria and Slay the Spire. I own Slay the Spire, it's in my back catalogue. I will get to it, but I don't have any references for it yet, so please bear with me whilst I explain what's going on. Quinterra sees you play as one of 4 different species currently in its early access mode, which came out earlier this month. A 5th one will be coming, obviously, because it's Quin and Terra, 5 Earths, or 5 worlds. And the premise of this game is that you choose your species and you'll go around and conquer these 5 worlds through a story mode. The way how you do that is taking on turn-based tactic battles, which places loads of different monsters that you own from your army onto the battlefield and having at it against the enemies. There are 2 different types of battles in play. One is basically eliminate all of the enemies that are on the battlefield, or at least specific enemies if you've got up against a boss who's got like loads of minions. If you kill the boss, then the minions will all fall. The second type of battle is aiming for victory points, and that is really unclear, and I'll come back to that later. Now, the big thing with Quinterra here is that everything is elemental and everything costs something. Those are kind of the 2 big things with Quinterra, and I'll try and break this down as best as I can. Every monster that you have has an element behind it. It will have earth, wind, fire, water. There's like a magic one, which seems to always relate to being poisonous. And there's a non-elemental version of something as well, which is kind of your generic, I can be pulled out from anywhere. You've also got different classes of monsters. So you've got like your big chunky monsters, as I call them, which are the ones that do the big damage, that are elemental, and that they you have to draw them from the earth to play them on the field, and I'll explain that in a sec. You've then got your minions, which are smaller, easily sent out onto the field, kind of lower level creatures that can be helpful to kind of overwhelm people or try and put up a first line of defence. You've also got some support towers as well. Now, your army that you send out into the field can have 2 support towers, 2 types of minions, and I think it was 12 like chunky giant monsters. But you'll only start off with 4 of them at the very beginning of each story mode campaign, and you'll need to buy or recruit the rest as you travel through the lands. Now, how does a actual battle in Quinterra take place? Well, strap in. He says, taking a swig of drink because he knows that he's tried to explain this several times already and it's gone horribly wrong. Each player starts off in their drafting phase first. So, as you'll see when you go into a battle screen, there's lots of hexagonal tiles and they've all got different elements to them. And the way how you get your monsters basically playable and into your hand to put them onto the battlefield is you have to draw them up from the earth. So if you've got like a pond and some grass, that'll be a green and a blue element probably attached to that. If there's like some weird mushrooms somewhere, then that'll be a purple and a green one. If it's a deserty sand one, you've got yellow there. So all the different colours and elements kind of pull out, and because your monsters are attached to those colour elements, that's the only way how you can get the monsters that are in your army actually active into the current battle that you've got. Once you do that, you can then choose to buff them, either with some armour that you may have purchased or found in treasure chests on your playthrough of story mode and attached before you got into battle, or you can add on crystals that are kind of on-the-fly extra buffs, essentially. Now, there is a bit of rhyme and reason as to what crystals you may want to attach, and that's because you need to have it kind of match certain elements to certain monsters, so only certain crystals fit with certain monsters as you kind of pull them all together. But they'll largely boost your health, add on a shield, or boost your attack damage, depending on what you're doing. Maybe occasionally add on some magic attack as well. Once you've done that, they're then pulled into your card thing for you to then actually take your action phase of the game. Now, again, Quinterra, always tricky and difficult and complicated, has different currencies of moves. So you'll have your move points, and you get 2 of those per turns, and those are specifically for support towers and minions. So you can place 2 minions down, you could place 2 support towers down, or 1 of each. And when they're placed down, you can place them, just like everything else, anywhere on the map. And that takes an awful lot of getting used to, because you will immediately want to kind of put your people in a corner and kind of build an army. No. Quinterra's maps are too small for that. So you're ending up basically placing yourself next to the enemies. And because as soon as you're placed, you can make your first move usually. Straight away, you'll be going straight in for an attack. Mahaha. That's what covers the support and minions, is your move points. You've then got mana, and you can have up to a maximum of 12 mana, and you get given 3 per round, or per turn, sorry. And once you've drawn your monsters, you have to have drawn them to actually have them in your hand to begin with. Once you've got them there, you can then use the mana points on the top right hand side of their kind of character picture. There'll be 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 mana depending on what you've got, to then push them onto the map. Again, you can put those anywhere on the map, so usually next to some enemies that you want to slap, and then you'll go straight in for an attack. You may also have some monsters that have passive abilities, or towers that have got passive abilities that you want to activate, and you need to do those within this phase as well. Some of those abilities will take up that monster or tower's turn. Some of them won't, and you'll just have to read the text to kind of understand exactly what you're dealing with that. Once you're happy with that, you'll then hit end turn, and then your enemy will do the same thing as well. You don't necessarily, although you kind of get to see what they vaguely got going on up on top, you don't get to see all of the cards that they have to play and all of their kind of subtle extra minions that they can bring onto the battlefield. And on the top of the screen, you'll also see 2 other things which are really key to your overall game. So the first one is in the middle, and that's how many turns you've got left in the game, or how many victory points that you've got to get, essentially. The longer you spend in a battle, the more the thing to the left of it, the something out of 50, you can see in the yellow, morale starts to reduce. And it's actually the morale that is what is your game over card. When your army is completely out of morale, it is game over, and your morale gets exhausted the longer you stay on battle. Every time you go through, if you see on those turn things in the top where you've got the green lines and there's some arrows going down, every time you pass that one of those on a turn, you lose 3 morale. Complicated? Oh, I'm only just beginning. So, that's kind of how the game works. On the story mode, you kind of fly around the 5 different worlds, and you approach kind of clusters of levels for you to choose from. Some of them will be battles, just like what you've seen. Some of them will be ports, so that you can buy or recruit new monsters to join your army. It could be that you go to a shop and you want to buy some crystals or some armour to attach to your monsters. It could also be that you've got some kind of rewards to get for some treasure chests, which will be some nice freebies as you go. You don't have to clear everything in an area, but if you don't, there's kind of a risk versus reward factor going on here. If you go through all of the battles and you can't clear them quickly, you're going to lose morale, which means that you're going to get closer to a game over and you're going to be in trouble. However, you need to win some of those battles to be able to get enough coins so that you can keep expanding your army, because having just 4 types of monsters for you to put into battle does not cut it. You need to start opening up all of the different types of elements that are out there and having different combinations, because each map is different. And so if you walk into a map that's primarily all about the yellow element and you've got no yellow elemental monsters at all, you're stuck. And it's so easy because the worlds change as you move from one kind of area for one species to another. what is important changes when you flick, and it flicks the switch when you move from one to the other. So you need to kind of prepare in advance and hope that you're walking into a scenario that you can still win. Quite often that's not the case, and so you might need to kind of park some early battles and move on for the sake of surviving for a little bit longer and hoping you can win something later on down the line to gain some morale back, get some coins, buy some some monsters that actually matter and can make a difference in this area, and adapt your playing style to suit. Some of that I'm sure is really, really good. The problem is that Quinterra tells you none of this up front. Its tutorial, which wasn't even there at the beginning of launch, it is in there now, but it is vague and confusing and breakable. I broke the tutorial 4 times in a row before it would let me get past the 5th one. I don't know quite what happened there. I know this is to do with early access and a lack of polish, but that lack of polish kind of extends throughout any kind of instructions that Quinterra gives you. It is vague. It doesn't tell you what a victory point is, and so even though it shows on the screen that I might be 2 victory points up or I might be 2 victory points down and therefore the battle should have been won or lost, the battle seems to just continue anyway, and I don't really kind of understand what is the thing that signals the end of those battles. Similarly, the lack of polish goes to any fail state for any battle as well. When you're supposed to clear battles and you're supposed to kill all of the enemies, you're supposed to do it within 10 turns. 10 turns come, 10 turns go, and you're still battling away and the fail state doesn't trigger. So why is it even there to begin with? Either make it an actual thing or implement it or don't show it at all. Very confusing. It does then lead, basically, to you getting stuck in stalemate battles. And I had this quite often at the end of whatever the second world was in Quinterra that I was playing. Whenever you reach these bosses, they're so well buffed and they bring out so many minions that, because especially if you've not been able to win all of the battles that you've had along the way, it comes up such a brick wall that you can't penetrate. But then you don't do it within 10 turns, so the fail state doesn't reach. But your minions aren't actually making enough of a difference for anything to actually move forward. So you just end up in a stalemate. So in the end, you just have to forfeit the match. Go in, forfeit the match. Go in, forfeit the match. Eventually until your morale is depleted and then it's game over. Then comes the kicker. Nothing seems to carry over from one run to another. So although it calls itself a roguelite, and I completely understand that it's procedurally generated and you're having to buy your own army as you go and kind of build it up as you go, nothing carries over. That's not a roguelite to me. There needs to be some kind of carryover to make it more substantial and better and interesting, and you to have a better foothold next time around. Yeah, fine, I might have learnt how some different enemies react in battle, but because the whole thing is procedurally generated in the map, I might not necessarily get that same layout again, and so I might get a completely different second world, or I might get a completely different layout of enemies. So it doesn't really hold weight as a roguelite at all. The next issue, and it's one that plagues the entire game of Quinterra for me and made it a bit of a frustrating experience rather than a challenge, and I know the difference between the two, but for me personally this led to frustration more than challenge, and that is how stingy it is for your rewards. Now, when you play a battle, you've got a star rating, like 1, 2, 3 or 4. I think I did eventually get to play some 5-star rated ones on one run through once. And what happens is that when you complete it, you'll get some gold coins, 100, 150, 200 on a very difficult battle. The problem is that every monster costs at least 200 coins. Minions cost 350. I don't know why it's not the other way round. Very confusing. Every crystal is normally about 100, 200, 350 coins. Any piece of armour is normally several hundred as well. You can only really pick one per little mini area that you go to. And so you're sitting there thinking, do I need to have more army? members so that I can draw more things out and have more variety and cover my bases. But then all of my army are then too weak to really go into battle. And because it's all randomly generated, what you get, you can't tactically create a clan and an army that works in cohesion together. So sometimes that then means that you think, right, well then I need to buy the buffs to shore up what I've got because nothing actually fits together properly. But then that means that you can't buy new army members, so when you move to a new area, you're buggered again because it gives you so much choice and so many different avenues, but ultimately not enough money to actually make use of those decisions. And so you constantly hit these arbitrary brick rules where you can't then get past because you're forced into weird and wonderful decisions. Once you leave an area, you can't go back to it. And although there's lots of choices and diverging paths, I feel like actually the game is almost designed as if you're supposed to have hit on every single one to have enough money to then buy all of the different upgrades and have the choices and match the crystals in and all of that kind of stuff. For you to really use all of that customization of being able to choose your army and buff it, you can't. Because you're only visiting half of the map as you go through the game, which then means you only get half of the loot, which means you only get half of the choice, and that means that it's only half as strong as what it should be when you hit the massively difficult end bosses. I'm sure with some balancing this could be solved, but ultimately what I was finding was that battles were becoming really long and drawn out experiences. The fail states weren't kicking in and I was getting quite bored. And so for me, Quinterra is going to be one of those ones that I'm probably not going to touch for the rest of early access. I might swing back round to it again on release just to kind of see what the difference of it is. But with that, tied with the lack of knowledge in the tutorials and the understanding of how mechanics work, there's also an awful lot of unresponsive menus, unresponsive clicks. Menus pop out on top of each other without closing. I'd quite often have to Control-Alt-Delete to kind of wrestle the game back. It's buggy and it's problematic. It doesn't lose your progress because it saves it quite regularly, but I do feel like there needs to be some real kind of quality of life improvement, specifically around menus opening up all over on top of each other and then you can't close them all. Seem to be the main problem for me. So yeah, looks colourful, has some really interesting concepts, really unbalanced for me personally. Just give me some more money so that I have some more choice on my army and give me a chance, essentially. For what's coming, or at least a little bit of forewarning as to what's coming on further on down the path so that I can change and adapt my army to suit the play conditions that I'm going to be thrown into at some point. If that doesn't put you off though, Quinterra is available in early access now. It's not really a recommendation from me though, sadly, and I'll be sticking with Faeria for the time being. Written review will be over on higherplayinggames.com. If you've got any questions about the game, I can try and answer them down in the comments below. But I'm not sure I'm probably the best person to do so. And thank you so much if you stuck with this one to the end, because it's a really complicated game to explain, and I hope I've kind of shed some light on it. Take care all. Bye-bye. Higher Plane Games is part of the Higher Plane Network, a completely independent media outlet supported by people like you. The goal is to create the best possible content that cultivates a richer indie scene for games as well as music and entertainment. To find out more and to get involved, visit patreon.com/higherplane network. Your support makes all the difference, and in return you'll gain access to bonus content and downloads. Thank you for watching.